shaking hands with the Pope and myself. I experienced my sexual awakening in a new way on the day I shook hands with Pope John Paul II. We had been told we might meet him and it seemed unbelievable. I had travelled to Drogheda with the Scouts when he visited Ireland in 1979. Images of his plane flying into Dublin Airport were etched deep in my memory. I had visited his home in Katowice where he grew up on a school tour, so I felt some connection with this iconic figure. We went to the Vatican and stood in line in the square with thousands of people. And he arrived, so strong, walking, shaking hands, smiling, so charismatic. A photographer captured the moment I stood with another student, his excited smile, my hand extended, shaking hands with the Pope. It was an extraordinary moment. It elevated my spirit and it energized my heart. I returned to the Irish College and had lunch. I lay on the bed. I was overwhelmed. I closed my eyes to replay the moment. Each cinematic detail as the day unfolded and brought me to this second. And then I found myself touching myself. It was the first time in my life. And intense ripples of pleasure cascaded through my body. It was my first orgasm and it was with myself. It was inexplicable, beautiful, and deeply shameful. My body was in perfect working order. I was 22. The sexual impulse is now beginning to fire in surprising ways. Maybe it wasn't that unusual, since we knew my grandfather only discovered the existence of homosexuality when he was 60. An unexpected insight for a man that had lived in a state of innocence all his life. He discovered that some men liked men rather than women, that some women preferred women to men, some even liked both. Someone must have told him in a bar, a place that often functioned as an unofficial hedge school. He had magnificent tattoos on his body, religious icons, which he explained were designed to give the English a little religion when he took off his shirt on the building sites in London. It must have taken a long time to get layered into his body. He would have been a TikTok star today, but we don't even have a single photograph of those works of art. It never entered our heads that it would be a good idea to try to photograph them and preserve them. The nurses liked them when he finally entered hospital, when he was 92. They hadn't faded, and it reinforced the sense that our family was unique in so many different ways. The Gregorian University had a global student body and the building was filled with voices from all over the world. I was excited by the mix of people, as I now know that I like novelty, uncertainty, the unknown, the exotic, and have been increasingly drawn to other cultures in recent years. Our lecture theatre was very big and the Jesuit lectures were formidable, scholarship oozing out of them as well as an ability to share their knowledge. I had no idea how to proceed. Should I take my notes in my best effort to translate from Italian, or should I write in imperfect Italian in the hope that some would stick in my memory? I didn't know, but I did know that failing to attend lectures would not help. Many of my Irish college classmates gave up attending after a few weeks, citing their inability to grasp the language. By Christmas, only 2 of us were attending faithfully, and life was getting easier as the theological language was quite focused and repetitive. Intelligence like Einstein's was not needed to recognize words like theologia and philosophia. The absent students then decided to visit the university for the final lectures of the term with gifts for the lecturers, a reminder that they all existed in advance of oral exams. Each course had a list of points which gave direction for revision. It was easier to turn up and muddle, and I was embarrassed, more alienated at the idea that the faux Irish charm would overcome the lack of attendance and work. I liked the rigour of the material, the challenge of trying to make sense of it. I also tried to remain in the background, but my love of language was noticed in the Greek class. The first lesson began with a large priest telling us in an American accent that we would be studying Koine Greek. This is common Greek, the Greek that would have been spoken by the soldiers. He gazed at the nuns as he said this, and I think we all got the current flowing beneath the river. We moved on after a pause to maximise the impact. Images of naked Spartans filled my mind, and it was a relief when he began to introduce the alphabet. The letters were so beautiful and the sounds really appealed to me. I studied Greek faithfully every day and got joint first place in the exam. I tried to avoid the management in the college because I sensed the vast psychological gulf between us. One seemed to live on traditional spirituality and GAA. I felt awkward every time I met him, and I got more awkward when he stopped me in the corridor, aware of my result, and said I would be back studying scripture in a few years. I blushed, pleased, also uncomfortable, and nodded until the awkwardness was too much for both of us and he left. I had been seen. attending all the lectures and studying quietly for long hours, earning the name Lazarus in the process because of my love of my bedroom, which was effectively a tomb, had actually highlighted me in new ways. I had an unfair advantage because I had a unique incentive to attend the lectures, which went far beyond academic interests. Bella ragazza. About 3 days after the start of the lectures, I noticed a young girl sitting alone. She was tall, blonde, with a little hint of a silver tint in her hair. She was beautiful. I was drawn to this girl and I felt I needed to get to know her. I went and sat beside her and we had a coffee during the break, and we sat beside each other for the rest of the morning, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and every day. I loved her, or what I thought was love, from the first moment I saw her. That became a pattern in my life at different times. This girl was truly unique. She was Italian, had studied theology for 2 years in Austria, and had taken the opportunity to study for 1 year in Rome before completing 2 more years in another university in Austria. She spoke Italian, German and English. She was from the northern region in Italy, a part that had originally belonged to Austria and had been gifted by Hitler to Mussolini during the Second World War. Her parents were highly educated and she had one sister. Her mother was from Vienna, a cradle of civilization and culture, home of extraordinary people like Klimt and Schiele and Mozart and Beethoven and Freud. She was such a gorgeous contrast to the routine in the Irish college, the increasing alienation I was already feeling, and I looked forward every day to seeing her sweet face, to listening to her unique insights because her intelligence was exceptional and she had a brilliant sense of humour. I was addicted to her smile and I struggled the odd days she didn't appear. We went for walks in the afternoon and it all felt safe as she said she had a boyfriend and I was on a path to priesthood, most of the indicators suggesting I had a credible vocation, and I seemed to be managing the challenges that were appearing on the horizon each day. Christmas arrived, she went home and I joined a priest and another student for a trip to Switzerland and France. We stayed in monasteries to cut costs. It was shortly after the film version of Umberto Eco's book The Name of the Rose had been released. The idea of murder in a monastery seemed realistic given the way some of the monks looked at us during the meals. We had one bowl and one spoon based on the idea of stability and simplicity in all things. We visited Annecy and were stunned by the beauty of the French version of Venice. We visited a few Catholic pilgrim sites including Paris-le-Monial, which is associated with St. Margaret Mary Alacoque, the home of John Vianney in a town called Ars, and we also found time to visit Taizé. We were familiar with the amazing music from Taizé. It was a foundation that was established by Brother Roger Schutz in 1940 during the Second World War, an ecumenical space with a strong appeal for young people who could join, chant simple, meditative and very beautiful hymns of praise, usually based on one line from the Psalms. Artwork was inspired by icons from the Eastern Orthodox tradition. It would have been spectacular except it was closed and the community had departed for some other venue. We had to be content with walking around the area and knowing that our intentions had been pure. We departed for the long journey back to Rome, but the roads were good and I was looking forward to seeing my Italian friend. The college held a concert early in the new year and reminded me of the inaugural debate in Dublin all those years ago when I started my journey to priesthood. I invited my friend as it was inconceivable that she would not be there with me. I brought her to my room and I introduced her to an Irish drink called Bailey's. She was a little shocked, but she liked the drink. She was more shocked at the concert. I never had any wish for the stage or to stand in the limelight, so I was one of two people with the critical task of opening and closing the curtain. Many notable Irish people in Rome attended the concert. It could have been a canary in the mine singing a very loud, jagged song if people had followed the Buddhist principle of seeing reality. It could have been obvious that the church had a major problem, but people averted their eyes and the scandals were a few years away from leaking and then cascading into public awareness, creating seismic waves that will never settle. It was actually worse in many ways than my experience in Dublin. It provided an artistic space for people to reach deep inside themselves and share what lived within their hearts. Some people today say that the courier company FedEx has the best data to understand what's happening in the global economy long before the highly paid analysts who make the stock exchange move on a daily basis. FedEx knows from what's being delivered whether the runes are positive or negative. In the same way, seeing seminarians simulating sexual activity on stage, wearing few clothes, legs open wide might have been seen and provoked a few questions about the suitability of people that would soon be in leadership positions in the church, people espousing celibacy that would be guiding married couples about family planning, some making decisions about annulment of marriages, and all with direct access to children. One of the sketches involved a bottle of cheap champagne called Spumante being opened in a blaze of bubbles. It was left sitting on the piano. I reached in and rescued it and drank quite a lot of it quickly to help me cope with the horror that was unfolding in front of me. Act 2 opened with a motorbike on stage, the engine roaring as a student from Northern Ireland, dressed in full leather, sang his heart out. He sang like Freddie Mercury, and at least he could sing, the sunglasses giving him a very cool look which lives long in the memory. I accompanied my friend home with the bus, and there were few words between us, just bemusement at what we'd both experienced. The unusual quietness on the return bus journey helped to still my animated self. Maybe it was the intensity of the night that motivated her to invite me to visit her home during the Easter break. We were sitting having a coffee in the university, and my heart definitely leaped at the idea. I thanked her politely and said I'd be delighted to join her, though I didn't believe it would happen. It's just human nature. People make various offers and generally fail to deliver. I would not have blamed her and thought she was very sweet to invite me. It reminded me of my grandfather, who would often return from the pub, telling us about the random strangers he had met. He said, always innocently and with pride, they enjoyed my company. They invited me to visit them soon. We always smiled and said, they don't mean it. Please don't go, it's pub talk. He usually looked a little hurt, but we were always just trying to protect him. Our natural scepticism at the idea that people could be genuine in full flow. The weeks passed quickly and Easter was arriving. My wonderful Italian friend brought me to the main train station called Termini, always a seedy place even in the warm Roman sunshine, and told me where to get the train ticket. She left for home when the lectures finished, and I would travel a week later on Easter Sunday night after the college liturgies were over and we had a break. I welcomed the opportunity to be free of clerical company, and I adored the idea of spending time with her. I felt this extraordinary peace when I was with her, and I loved everything about her. It helped me to wave goodbye to her as the train departed, waiting until I could no longer see her hand or the train, happy I would have so much time with her in a few days. I was also working in a soup kitchen a few times a week with nuns from Mother Teresa's congregation, the Medical Missionaries of Mary. Many were Indian girls in training, and their gentle beauty and evident sanctity was addictive. I got insights into Roman life when the destitute arrived for the food that sustained them each day, a sharp contrast to the shops selling extraordinarily expensive couture. It was a powerful experience, and I thought of it many years later during the COVID pandemic when I used to deliver food to families in need with a colleague in the locality where I was working. I was resolute in my determination to treat everyone with as much dignity as was possible. Some models suggested by the Department of Social Protection required recipients to visit and collect a food parcel worth €10. Another approach was sending food parcels out in the post. I organised food parcels worth over €40 each week and tried to deliver discreetly in spite of one local postman's fondness for following myself and another colleague to try to find out who was getting the food. One night I was departing late and the guard drove over checking who was leaving the school building. We chatted a little and I mentioned how good it was that the Irish state was providing so many supports for people. He stopped for a second, looked at me and said, I'm not being nosy, but how many are getting food? I paused and said, it's surprising how many, more than we might have expected. I tried to speak a version of Hiberno English where Irish people say something, often using a lot of words while saying nothing at the same time. He seemed content to accept he wasn't getting a specific number, and we both drove into the darkness. The Easter liturgies were special. Attending Mass in such old churches with frescoes and symbolism on every wall filled my heart with joy. It's interesting how Easter is the high point of the Catholic Church's annual liturgical calendar, and it's usually the least well attended, as many more are drawn to the sentimentality of the Christmas story, not realising that an American soft drinks company did a lot to popularise aspects of the Christmas celebration in pursuit of financial profits. I was excited walking through the streets as Rome felt like a great world capital, and the Catholic Church was a centre of power on earth where millions of people looked for guidance and leadership. And I was living there, studying theology, learning Italian and Greek, on the path to an interesting life. And then I thought of my friend, because she was never far from my mind, and my heart sang a little tune, a joyful overture in honour of the week that was about to begin with her in the Italian Alps. Life felt so good. Life felt even better when I saw her standing on the platform waiting for me. It was a short walk to the large apartment, one of four in a building that required wealth to live there. The family also had a summer residence in the mountains, and I was the happiest I'd ever been in my life to be welcomed into our home. Her sister was unmarried and expecting a baby soon. I sensed the mother's discomfort, a proud, intelligent Catholic zealot from Vienna, an aristocratic disposition that did not appreciate her daughter's behaviour, which would bring a small child into the home soon. Her dad was a tall, gentle soul, a man that was easy to connect with, and he was always warm and friendly to me, even though I imagine he was equally puzzled at his daughter bringing this Irish stray to their home during the Easter break. I intended to cause as little inconvenience to this family as possible, and hopefully would only sleep in the apartment, be out of the way for the rest of the time. She brought me to a bar later to meet her friends and her boyfriend. I looked at him, I listened to him. He was older than her, serious, and I felt they were not remotely compatible. I'm not sure if I thought this for their sake, her sake, his sake, or my sake, but I felt certain that his older self would not be good for her. Maybe that's why she liked me, because I always made her laugh and we seemed to have a sweet connection. Every moment with her was very special. This wasn't ideal to think that I was sharing it with others, but I've always been possessive, and it's something I have tried to amend as I got older. It's not a great way to be, and I didn't really know how to manage myself. We spent most of the days together, and that helped. We visited our home in the mountains, and it was absolutely spectacular to walk across the fields, the scenery beyond belief, alpine flowers I'd never seen, warm sunshine, peace that seemed to fill every part of my being, and always her beautiful smile and sweet face framed by the sun's rays, her skin turning golden brown, giving her the appearance of a goddess. Helen of Troy, Cleopatra and Venus, walking among mere mortals. Food really rarely tasted so nice. Time seemed to disappear, and I hated having to return in the evenings, as a little odyssey each day seemed to be absolutely perfect. Destiny, written in the heavens before I was born. Her mother chose to reveal the sweet surprise on Thursday, so it was no longer a surprise. We were going to have a trip in an aeroplane around the Dolomites. It was just the pilot, who was also her cousin, and the two of us sitting in the back of a Cessna ready for takeoff. It didn't take long for us to be flying among the alpine peaks covered in snow, mountain walks visible, and the feeling of having left Earth in more ways than one, floating through the air, the noise of the engines receding, just us and whatever dreams that lay within, our hearts beating, hopefully as one, as I felt life could and would never be the same again. I was sitting in a plane with a young woman that I adored, but did not have the language to articulate what was becoming clearer each day. I didn't dare to use words. I smiled. I wanted to hold her hand, a platonic gesture of the platonic love I felt for her. The plane landed, and I've often thought I never landed after that short trip among one of nature's most beautiful landscapes. The rest of our time passed in a happy haze of pure joy, and then we were on the train back to Rome on Sunday night, ready for a sharp dose of clerical reality once they entered the gates of the Irish College again. I was restless on the train journey back. I could not settle. I asked her to join me in the corridor where there was a little privacy. I looked at her, praying she would listen with compassionate, loving ears and allow her warm heart to respond positively. It didn't take long. I'm going to leave my studies in June and start a new life, and I really want you to be part of it. I want you, and I give all I am doing now so I can be with you. She was silent, her inner self listening attentively and respectfully. Even if you say no, I'm still giving up my studies. There are things I can't accept about this life, and I must choose a new path. We sat quietly for the remainder of the journey back to Rome. I went to her apartment and said goodbye to her in the street. It felt right. I was so needy, but did not press her for an answer, even though I just wanted her to say yes, and then I felt all would be well. We met in the university each day and resumed our normal routine, but everything had changed. She knew I was going to leave, and it would be an earthquake for a few people, one that would be contained in time, but still quite a surprise, given that the optics looked so well all year. I had become increasingly alienated from the Catholic Church since arriving in Rome. I disliked the male energy, I disliked the hypocrisy. It was obvious that homosexual relationships were occurring among the student and probably priestly body. I wasn't fixated on homosexuality, but I did think the vow of celibacy was something we were committed to and training in later life. It was introduced in 1139 at the Second Lateran Council, and has been affirmed ever since, although the Eastern Orthodox Church and Maronite Church adopted a different model, and some priests were allowed to marry. I would not have remained, even if celibacy was optional. I felt intense loneliness throughout the year, and the normality of a relationship with a woman, marriage and maybe children seemed the best option for happiness. All was focused on my Italian love. I remember the day when we had visited the Church of Ireland Theological College as part of an ecumenical event in Dublin. I was very struck by the normality of family life, which was a standard feature for many of the Protestant clergy, and it seemed to me to be so natural and such a contrast with the juvenile clericalism and dishonesty that was the norm in the seminary. The girl I hoped to marry told me she accepted my offer and would return home the following weekend to finish with her boyfriend and tell her family. This was a big and exciting moment. I met her when she returned to Rome. I just took her hand in mine and we didn't speak. She told me after a while that she had told everyone, and she was happy. We returned to her apartment and we had a chaste kiss for the first time, and it was glorious. I rang my parents to share the news. My mother was outraged because there was a sense in which she had begun to like the idea of me becoming a priest, and she raged with new intensity. She rang the next day and told me she had booked flights and the family would be visiting soon. I was horrified. I knew she would meet people in the college, and I expected to be humiliated by her sheer presence, and this was before she would have the discomfort of the heat, the food and the crowds, as well as her anger at me, now finding a new reason to burn brightly. She would take up a lot of time I wanted to spend with my new girlfriend as we were still attending lectures. It seemed to me a good idea for me to finish the course and do the exams, while she would be returning to university in Austria in September. There was a lot ahead of us, but we believed we could manage all with two warm hearts aligned and in love with each other. I was happy to see my little brother when they arrived, though the circumstances were less than ideal. It didn't take long for my mother to hear about an Irish pub, and that was the location for our first meeting with my girlfriend. The awkwardness of it continues to resonate, as there was a sense in which I remained under my mother's intense power, even as I was struggling to forge an independent path, one I was willing to work for, just as I had worked for a life that was now stillborn. I told her I've done nothing wrong. I looked at her life and decided it's not for me. Many other young men had done the same thing, and life goes on. Leaving was one thing. Bringing an Italian girl, as my mother used to call her, an Italian floozy to her door, was something else. Deep within my mother's perverted brain, she had a model of Italian women as descendants of Eve, having left the Garden of Eden and populating the world with her sexual wiles. Efforts to tell my mother that my girlfriend was very pure came from an extraordinarily respectable family. She was very good and not like that, and if she was like that, then I would not have been interested, given the way I idealised a woman. Was entirely in vain. I liked her because she was beautiful and pure. Experience and actual truth didn't matter when my mother looked into her own dark heart to find certainty that she was right. That, like the Pope, she was infallible when speaking ex cathedra, although her model of infallibility went far beyond faith and morals, as she could never be wrong. In this case, she was talking about my girl's faith and morals, and I was disgusted by my mother in ways I never thought possible, and felt very protective of the young one that had transformed my life. One or two students in the Irish college were very helpful, and they brought my parents on a couple of trips, providing a break for all of us. I could visit my girlfriend in her apartment and just sit on the couch with her, resting from the dark emotional storm that was raging through the city at every moment in Rome seemed to reinforce my mother's sense of betrayal. I was going to leave my studies for the priesthood, and this was really an experience of abandonment for my mother, touching something deep within her that she could not contain or did not wish to contain, as maybe she loved the feeling of the luminous anger that coursed through her when she had someone to act as the target for her anger, regardless of the rights or wrongs of any situation or behaviour. Although I tried, I knew there was little point in trying to reason with her. It was an example of what the United States Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld characterised as unknown unknowns in 2002 when discussing the allegation that Saddam Hussein's government was supplying weapons of mass destruction to terrorist groups, thereby providing a rationale for the Gulf War. Most reasonable people might have accepted, even felt a little disappointment, and hopefully some empathy for a family member when his or her life was heading into deep stormy seas with little sight of land, imploding with no sense of where the chaos would end. But I knew that our family was exceptional and not in a good way, and felt even if we won a lottery and had unknowns to manage, we would turn that happy opportunity into the darkest heart of darkness as well, harvesting a rich crop of toxic fruits in the process. This was before I began to think of my mother as an evil spirit, one weapon of focused destruction, one who could annihilate a person's character and self-belief, if not resisted at some level and avoided where possible. Her dark energy seemed as if it was beginning to infect all that mattered to me, the love and goodness I had experienced in recent months, the oasis of beautiful, ineffable joy that filled my heart and gave me hope and belief that marrying this girl would take life in new directions, a life that I was destined to lead, which would bring me to new places, free from the tyranny of my home and my mother's influence. It felt like it was a providential gift for all that I had endured, and it felt right, except exactly what I was supposed to be doing at that point in my life. I called to my girlfriend's apartment one evening. She wasn't expecting me, and I was not expecting to find a young priest who I recognised in university sitting comfortably on our couch. I immediately sensed it wasn't his first visit, and the two Italian girls that shared the apartment with her were able to chat comfortably with him. The only sliver of comfort was the fact that he was not Irish, but otherwise this was bad, so bad, and I felt pain travelling through me as we made some small talk, the atmosphere having been transformed in a good way by my presence. I told her I was going to go, and I left, not really caring in that specific moment if I saw her again. I felt physically weak as I made my way back to the Irish college. I could smell the deception. I had no one I could share this moment with, as I thought I was going to pass out in the street. I took no notice of the traffic and really tested the idea that the Roman driver, speeding through the streets recklessly, would stop at a zebra crossing once a pedestrian walked out in front of them. I wondered, would I feel the impact, and would it be enough to kill me, or would I be left crippled or worse, brain damaged, and little awareness of what had been, what could have been, and now the hell of knowing that the dream would evolve into a nightmare I could never escape. The next distraction was meeting my mother, my father and brother and visiting a few churches that contained many wax statues of saints. It was a feature of many of the Italian churches at the time. The day passed and the day ended with me telling them I had to visit my girlfriend. I asked her to go for a walk with me, and having endured my mother's negative energy all day, having gone through all the grisly delights in recent weeks, I decided it was my turn to blow things up. I felt I had earned the right. She was a gentle girl and she was certainly not used to conflict, whereas I felt I'd been reared in a war zone and I had the scars to prove it. I confronted her about the handsome, sophisticated, worldly priest that had been sitting in her apartment in such a relaxed state until I arrived. She was silent. I was so angry. The thoughts of the life I was surrendering freely, and the hope of the life we had agreed to try to build together, a life that would not be easy to construct, but a life we could have if committed and willing to work for it. She answered she didn't understand herself, that he had approached her and invited her out, and that she'd gone out a couple of times with him, but that nothing had happened between them. She confirmed it was not his first time to visit the apartment. I was spent, my normal energy levels at zero, trying to listen to her and love her while fighting the intense hatred I felt for her and him at that precise moment. We looked at each other and it seemed to me that this was beyond repair. She would not want me even if I calmed down and could learn to trust her again. I wasn't sure I could, because I tended to live in a world where I valued certainties in the context of relationship, the certainty that a couple in love could depend on each other. I was 22 and still had a lifetime of learning ahead of me, lessons that might help me to understand but not heal, having experienced a level of heartbreak that was so deep because the love I felt for her had been so profound. How could we move forward? Could we move forward? Was it even worth the effort to try, given that she involved herself with a priest even as my life was imploding in front of her? She was, and I'm sure she still is, a good soul. We moved forward, we attended lectures together. I'd been doing a course in American church history. Efforts to skip the whole history course failed after meeting the dean of the university when I arrived in September. He asked me about the result of the Council of Chalcedon, which was held in 451 to challenge a number of heresies about Jesus' nature. The council stated that Jesus was fully human and fully divine. I had studied this 4 years before but didn't recall the detail. He told me to study history for 1 year and I would not have to do it the following year, and this would leave more time for Latin. This seemed fair. It gave me an opportunity to learn from an aristocratic Jesuit called Marcel Chapin, and I was better for the experience, although it was daunting to sit in front of him and do an oral exam with him. The American history option was taken by all the American students and me. I also had many happy times playing soccer with them. They were very nice to me. I decided not to do the American history exam at the end, and I was practically assured I only had to turn up and it'd be okay, but I was uncomfortable with the idea. I had lost my motivation and struggled for one of the first times in my life to get out of bed in the morning. The director of the Irish called me into his office one day and said, "You're a bad example." I replied, "There are bigger problems." He was not too happy. "It's difficult. It's been difficult all year to get a night's sleep with all the partying, the hoops and whatever else is going on." He was angry. "Give me evidence," he replied. "Walk down the corridor any night, listen and knock on any door, and you'll have all the evidence you want." I did not expect to be in this situation, I'm sorry, but when I was doing everything right, my example didn't matter, and my bad example, as you call it, doesn't matter now either. I'd already told him I would be leaving, and he was certainly disappointed, although there was no warmth in his response. I think he had hopes for me and how he could serve the church, and now they had crumbled. My parents had left a few weeks before, also disappointed at best and nursing a deep sense of grievance at worst. My brother's cute and innocent smile remained in my memory. His lack of understanding at every level was poignant. I felt like I was living in a parallel universe, in a world where people continued to do the normal daily practices to prepare for priesthood, while I was passing a couple of weeks before departing to a new life. Finishing the exams held out the promise I might return, but I knew I would not walk through the doors of the seminary again. Rome offers many surprises. It reminded me of the first time I had visited St. Peter's Basilica and walked around the magnificent Bernini altar. There are 8 sculptures at the base of each corner, and they show a woman in labour. In the last one, the woman's face has been replaced by the baby's cute face. Who would have expected to find such an extraordinary artwork at the base of the main altar in one of the most important churches in the world, serving a theology that normalised the repression of women and deified purity? The only thing that would have been more shocking would have been to find a Sheila na gig over a door to the Pro Cathedral in Dublin. Those rough sculptures, which are found in churches throughout Europe, but particularly in Ireland, are usually large representations of female genitalia. Again, it was always shocking to discover them in such sacred places, given the traditional hostility to women that's been such a feature of Western civilization, often given additional texture by Catholic teaching. I took more time to spend with my girlfriend. A nice cappuccino, more expensive because we were sitting outside the coffee shop, Because it's cheaper sitting inside and cheaper again if standing at the counter. Her smile, warm Roman sunshine embracing us made life feel good. It was good. The year came to a conclusion with us sitting outside lecture theatres together waiting to go in to do oral exams and the occasional written exam. It was time to pack bags and leave the eternal city. I'm not very good at endings, and so it was a relief that my girlfriend's father was collecting her and bringing her back home. The future was an abyss. Would I see her again? What would I do? I had no idea. All I did know is that I would pay a high price for the beauty of the time I spent with her when I returned home to Dublin.